After leaving a voicemail for my wife, Angela, who I've been married to for 5 years, I checked my phone one last time. I just closed a massive service deal with a major company here in California, a company with offices all across the country. I knew Benjamin Ayrton, my boss, would be ecstatic. This contract meant big things for our IT firm and a nice boost to my salary. Maybe, I thought, this would finally be the time Angela and I could start the family we'd always talked about. But something had been eating at me ever since I returned from a recent camping trip with Benjamin. Angela hadn't been herself. She seemed distant, cold, even snapping at me over the tiniest things. It wasn't just her mood. The moment I got back home, I was throwing a load of laundry in, and I noticed something strange on her underwear. There was a peculiar texture, and a strong, unfamiliar scent that I couldn't ignore. The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the stomach. It was as if my whole world was starting to fall apart. I had to know the truth, so I made the decision to meet with an attorney before heading back to the West Coast. If Angela had betrayed me, I knew there'd be no going back. I reached out to Patricia Chander, a family law and divorce specialist recommended by a friend who had just gone through a messy breakup of his own. "Are you sure Angela's cheating on you?" Patricia asked as I explained everything I suspected. "Not 100%, I admitted. But I need to know for sure. I want a divorce." Patricia nodded. "Divorces in California don't typically assign fault," she explained. "You could file for infidelity, but you'll need solid proof. Photos, videos, that sort of thing." "What exactly do I need?" I asked, a cold dread sinking in. "Well, if you want to be certain, we could have an investigator look into it," she said. I agreed, and she offered to set it up. "Since you and Angela both earn about the same, and you don't have property or kids together, it should be a fairly straightforward split. If we can prove infidelity, that could help you get a more favorable outcome." I nodded. "All right, let's do it." I would be gone for about 3 days, so I figured that's when it would all go down. Patricia contacted her investigator, Kane Gimson, who suggested I install a tracking app on Angela's phone. He even offered me a device to record our landline calls and a small audio recorder to slip into her purse. I hated the idea of resorting to this, but I needed answers. As the days passed, even Benjamin started acting strangely around me. It was like he knew something I didn't. The feeling in my gut only grew stronger. Then the day finally arrived. Angela drove me to the airport, kissed me goodbye, and I promised I'd call her that evening. When I did, she caught me off guard by mentioning she'd be waitressing at a party Benjamin was hosting. Apparently, one of his regular servers had called in sick, and he'd asked Angela to cover, offering her $150 for the night. "Okay, but be careful," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just tell me about it tomorrow." "Sure," she replied, her voice dripping with sweetness. "You know I love you, right?" "I love you too," I said, my stomach twisting as I hung up. Right after, I called Kane to let him know where Angela would be that night. "We'll keep an eye on her and let you know what happens," Kane assured me. The next day, I tried calling Angela's cell, but there was no answer. I tried our landline only to hear the machine pick up. I told myself she couldn't have spent the night at Benjamin's. There was no way. But as the day dragged on, an email from Kane arrived, and my heart sank. Angela spent the night at Benjamin's place. "She's still there," the email read. He'd attached photos that I won't ever be able to forget. It wasn't just Benjamin. In these photos, Angela was with another man I once considered a friend. I felt my hands start to shake as I stared at the images. I could hardly breathe, let alone think. I called Angela again, but it went straight to voicemail. Furious, I headed down to the hotel bar to drown my anger. By morning, I checked the tracker on her phone. Sure enough, it was still at Benjamin's place. Kane's follow-up email confirmed it, with more photos showing Angela with other people, including Benjamin's son, Matt, and several employees from Benjamin's IT team. There were other faces I didn't recognize, probably Matt's friends. I was nauseous. With the contract signed and everything settled, I packed up, checked out of the hotel, and caught an early flight back home. When I arrived, Angela's car was gone. I went inside to change, then called Patricia. Her receptionist said she could see me that afternoon. When Angela finally picked up her phone, she sounded a little breathless. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Where are you?" "I'm at home," she replied, her tone perfectly composed. "Just wrapping up some things before classes start." I bit down on my frustration. "All right, well, I'm done here in California and on my way back." "Okay," she said softly. "I miss you so much. Call me when you land, and I'll pick you up from the airport." "No need," I replied, my voice distant. "I'll just grab a taxi." I hung up, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. I hadn't said, "I love you," or anything about looking forward to seeing her. She'd probably noticed, but I didn't care anymore. I left the house to visit Patricia, imagining Angela sitting there, confused by the way I'd ended the call. Normally, I always said, "I love you" before hanging up, but not this time. And my voice, well, it probably sounded colder than usual. Angela had originally planned to come home after that first night. She told herself that once classes started, she'd come clean, that I'd never find out. So, she stayed another night. She welcomed Benjamin home from work, only to find Matt in bed with her. Benjamin smirked at the sight, his voice dripping with mock affection. "Maybe I should send your husband on trips more often," he said. Angela chuckled. "You know, I've got classes starting soon," she said, as if this whole thing were just a game. "I'll be tied up for next week, but I'd never do anything with him around." "Why not?" Benjamin teased. "Maybe he'd like to see what real men do." The laughter that followed made Angela shudder. "I had a great time," she admitted, her tone flat. "But I don't want to hurt Elton. I still love him." "Maybe I'll make sure he's gone for another weekend," Benjamin suggested. "Then you can come visit us again." "It does sound fun," Angela said with a smirk. "But at some point he'll find out. Elton's not an idiot." Benjamin just shrugged and picked up a video camera. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll take care of Elton. But here's the thing. I don't want you with him anymore. You're ours now." "Got it." Angela smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "Got it. All right," Angela muttered, her voice low. "I'll think of something." Just like that, she became someone I didn't recognize. Someone enjoying the attention of Benjamin's friends and colleagues, as if she were at some twisted, hedonistic party. When I finally saw all the evidence Kane had gathered, it hit me hard. There were photos, and even 2 DVDs showing her with men doing things she'd never have dreamed of doing with me. Watching it felt like I was looking at a stranger, someone completely unrecognizable, making choices I couldn't even begin to understand. Patricia tried to offer some kind of comfort, but it was clear there was no going back from this. "Why would she do this?" I muttered, still reeling from the shock of the betrayal after 5 years together. And Benjamin, someone I thought was my friend, was in the middle of it. "We'll proceed with the divorce and cite infidelity," Patricia confirmed. "I can also file a lawsuit for alienation of affection against Benjamin and the others. It might not go far, but we could at least get a decent settlement." "Do what you have to," I said, my voice hollow. Patricia's expression softened, but she gave me a warning look. "Just keep it together, all right? Don't do something you'll regret." "I won't," I assured her, though I wasn't sure if I was lying to her or myself. "But I'm done here. I can't work for Benjamin anymore. I can't even be around him or those guys." I left Patricia's office in a daze, sat in my car, and started scrolling through my contacts until I found Gabriel Macy's number. "Macy here," Gabriel answered, his voice friendly. "Hey Gabriel, it's Elton. Elton Roger." "Elton, it's been a while," he said warmly. "How are things?" "Could be better," I admitted, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Is that opening still available at Empire?" Gabriel had been trying to recruit me for months, but out of loyalty to Benjamin, I turned him down. Now that loyalty was gone. "Of course it's still open," Gabriel replied with a chuckle. "Have you finally decided to join a respectable team?" "Yeah, something like that," I said, holding back the full truth. "Let's just say I've realized I can't stay where I am anymore. I'm sorry to hear that, Elton. Is there anything I can do? Just give me a job, I told him, the words coming out more desperate than I intended. I'll give you everything I gave Benjamin, and more. No problem, Gabriel said, sounding confident. Why don't you and Angela come over tonight for dinner? Rose makes a lasagna to die for. We can catch up and I'll go over the offer details. I'd love to, I said, then paused. But I won't be bringing Angela. My tone was more serious than I intended. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Is everything all right? Gabriel asked, concerned. I'd rather explain in person, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Let's just say it's complicated. Well, Rose is a certified counselor, Gabriel said gently. If you need to talk, she might be able to help. That sounded like exactly what I needed. That actually sounds good, I said, a small sense of relief starting to trickle in. I'll be there. Great. Come around 6:30, Gabriel suggested. I'll see you then. See you, I replied, ending the call. For the first time in days, I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. With Gabriel's job offer secured, the future suddenly seemed a little clearer. I started the car and drove home, but Angela was still nowhere to be found. I grabbed my briefcase, stepped inside, and took a long hot shower to shake off the tension. After changing into something more comfortable, I sat down at my computer to draft my resignation letter. Around 5 o'clock, Angela finally came home, and when she saw me at the desk, she walked over and leaned down to kiss me. I turned away just in time, and she awkwardly planted a kiss on my cheek instead. Everything okay? She asked, her voice laced with an edge of concern. Not really, I replied, keeping my tone flat. I'm not feeling well. Probably just jet lag or something. I'll sleep on the futon tonight. You're going out? She asked, frowning. Will you be coming back? I have dinner plans, I said, my voice distant. Don't wait up for me. Are you meeting a woman? She asked, her voice suddenly tense. You wondering if I'm cheating on you? I shot back, unable to hide the bitterness. I haven't cheated on you in all these years, and I have no intention of starting now. Can you say the same? Her face paled, and she stammered. Of course I can. She tried to brush it off, asking, So, how did the trip go? Good, I replied curtly. How's your little job with Benjamin? It went well, she answered, her eyes darting away for a moment. Even when it was tough, it was fun. I bet, I replied flatly, glancing at my watch. I should go. I saved my work, turned off the computer, and walked toward the bedroom to change into something more formal. When I came out, Angela was still sitting on the sofa, watching me with a curious expression. How long will you be out? She asked, trying to sound casual. Not sure, I said, not meeting her eyes. Don't wait up for me. I headed for the door without another word or gesture. Angela watched me leave, likely noticing that I hadn't kissed her goodbye or said, I love you. Something I always did, but this time I couldn't bring myself to care. As soon as I pulled out of the driveway, I saw her reach for the phone. She dialed Benjamin, unaware that every word was being recorded. Benjamin, she said, her voice anxious. I think he knows something. What makes you think that? Benjamin asked, sounding almost amused. He hasn't touched me, she said, sounding frazzled. He usually kisses me, says he loves me, but tonight he was just cold. He said he had dinner plans, but didn't say with whom. So what if he knows? Benjamin replied nonchalantly. You can always come stay with us. Don't worry about Elton. I'll keep him busy enough that he's barely ever home. But I don't want to lose him, Benjamin, she insisted. I still love him. Benjamin laughed, the sound cold and mocking. Yeah, sure you do. You've shown us all how much you love him these past couple of days, haven't you? Stop, she said sharply, her voice breaking. I know what I did and I liked it, but that doesn't mean I want to lose Elton. Benjamin's tone turned dismissive. Look, just give him time. He'll come around. If he doesn't, we'll deal with it. You're ours now, and you'll help us keep things in line. You wouldn't want the school board seeing that footage? Would you? You wouldn't dare? She whispered, horrified. Oh, I would, Benjamin sneered. There's plenty of video of you in compromising positions. So you better make sure little Elton behaves. Her defeated sigh was the last thing I heard before the recording ended. I clenched my jaw, disgust rising in me like bile as I pulled up to Gabriel and Rose Macy's two-story house. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd picked up on the way and rang the doorbell. Gabriel opened the door with a welcoming smile, accepting the wine with a nod. Come on in, Elton, he said. Thanks for bringing this. It'll go perfectly with dinner. He led me into the dining room, where Rose was setting the table. Elton, meet my wife, Rose. Rose, this is Elton Roger, our new operations manager. Gabriel introduced us. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Macy, I said, shaking her hand. Please call me Rose, she replied with a warm smile. Mrs. Macy sounds too formal. We took our seats, and Rose served up her famous lasagna while Gabriel poured the wine. The food was incredible, and I couldn't help but tell her, this is the best lasagna I've ever had. I'm glad you like it, Rose said. It's one of my favorite recipes. After some small talk, Gabriel gave me a curious look. So, Elton, what made you decide to leave Benjamin's firm so suddenly? I hesitated but then nodded. It's a long story, I said, gathering my thoughts before I told them everything. By the time I finished, Gabriel shook his head, looking genuinely shocked. Unbelievable, he said softly. I'm sorry, Elton. Something similar happened to me once, though not under these circumstances. So, besides taking this job, what's next? Gabriel asked as we sat back in our chairs after finishing the brandy. I filed for divorce, I admitted, the weight of the words settling heavily in the room. My lawyer says it should be a straightforward split, given the circumstances. Rose's eyes softened with sympathy. Have you considered counseling? She asked gently. I shook my head. The thought of sitting down with a stranger and hashing out my emotions felt like a lifetime ago. It's gone too far. I don't even know who she is anymore. How are you holding up? Rose asked, her voice warm and kind. Honestly, not well. I confessed, my words feeling raw. My lawyer suggested I try to act normal around her, but it's tough. I can barely look at her. You know, seeing a psychologist could really help, Rose offered. I'd be glad to talk with you if you're open to it. Gabriel chimed in, his smile genuine. Rose is incredible at what she does. She was a godsend for me when I went through a rough patch. I thought about it for a moment. I'd appreciate that, Rose, I said, nodding at her. Really? Good man, Gabriel said, patting my shoulder. Take the time you need. Just let us know, and we'll work it into your schedule. Dinner ended, and Gabriel took me to his office to go over the details of my new role. Over another glass of brandy, we spent the next couple of hours discussing the position, the team, and the projects I'd be managing. By the time we finished, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. After shaking Gabriel's hand and thanking him, I headed home, the sense of finality in the air nearly suffocating. When I arrived around 10 p.m., I found the lights still on, and there, sitting on the sofa, was Angela. How did the meeting go? She asked, looking up at me. It went well. Thank you, I replied, my tone as curt as I could make it. Now, if you don't mind, I'll be heading to bed. I made my way to the spare bedroom where I'd set up my computer, stripping off my clothes as I started to undress. I was trying to shut out everything, to block out the mess that was my life. But then Angela appeared in the doorway. Are you sleeping in here now? She asked, her voice unsure. I told you I'm not feeling well, I said, brushing her off as I kept my back to her. The futon's fine. She hesitated, then spoke again, her voice softer. It's just, you were gone for a few days and I thought maybe we could. You know, I'm not in the mood, I interrupted, feeling a wave of disgust wash over me at the thought of touching her. Just thinking about it. I couldn't even finish the sentence. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Maybe tomorrow? I didn't answer. Instead, I listened to the faint sound of her retreating footsteps as she turned away, probably wondering if I knew. But at that moment I didn't care. The next morning I woke up early. I grabbed my resignation letter and downloaded the audio file from her phone call with Benjamin, the one where she admitted everything. Without saying a word to Angela, I left the house. By the time I reached the office, I barely acknowledged anyone. I headed straight to my office and began packing up. Benjamin walked in looking confused. "What's going on?" he asked, clearly bewildered. I didn't answer. I handed him 2 envelopes. One contained the signed contract from California, the other, my resignation letter, effective immediately. "I expect my bonus, final salary, and any unused vacation pay," I said coldly. Benjamin looked down at the envelopes, stunned. "Resignation? Are you serious?" he stammered. "Why are you leaving? Don't act like you don't know." I shot back, my voice dripping with disdain. "I'm not some fool. Benjamin, I can't work here anymore. So I'm leaving for another company." "Wait. Elton, can we talk about this?" Benjamin pleaded, stepping closer. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice low but seething with anger. "I thought we were friends, but you stabbed me in the back and ruined my marriage." Benjamin scoffed, clearly unfazed. "It's not like I forced her. Angela was more than willing." "Is that what you think?" I asked, incredulous. "How long has this been going on?" Benjamin leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Since that camping trip, actually. The second day when you were skiing. She came to me practically begging, even mentioned that I'm, let's say, better than you." "Is that why you made me leave that day?" I demanded, the blood in my veins boiling. "So you could have her all to yourself?" Benjamin didn't even bother to deny it. "Why not? Hiring her as a waitress at the party? Just another chance for some fun." I pulled out my phone, stopping the recording I'd started the moment Benjamin entered my office. "Thanks for your confession," I said coolly. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm heading down to HR. Goodbye, Benjamin." "Wait," he said, scrambling as I turned to leave. "You can't use that recording." "We'll see about that," I replied, the finality in my voice settling over the room. "Goodbye, Benjamin. I hope you rot in hell." I grabbed my things and walked out, the weight of the decision settling on me like a heavy cloak. As I reached the door, I heard Benjamin's voice call after me. "Hey, you forgot something." I glanced back and saw him holding up a framed photo of Angela that had been on my desk for years. "Keep it," I said flatly. "If you and your son want her so much, she's all yours. I'm done with that." Without waiting for a response, I walked out, leaving Benjamin staring after me in stunned silence. On my drive home, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Angela. I answered, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "He resigned," she said, her voice frantic. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my calm. "Yeah, he just handed in the signed contract and a resignation letter," Benjamin explained. "He knows Angela. I don't know how, but he does." "What did you tell him?" she asked, panic edging her voice. "The truth," Benjamin replied with a sigh. "I told him about our time together on that hike." "You idiot," Angela snapped, her voice choked with frustration. "And what about the photo I kept?" "Oh, he didn't want it," Benjamin said, his tone casual. "Told me to keep it. Guess he's really done with you." Angela's voice cracked as she started crying. "So what do we do?" she asked, defeated. "Not my problem," Benjamin replied dismissively. "He's your husband. You figure it out. Unless, of course, you want me to step in and make him see things our way." "No," she whispered. "You've done enough. Just stay out of it. I'll handle things." Benjamin gave a nonchalant "as you wish," then hung up. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Angela's car parked outside. I checked around to make sure Benjamin wasn't anywhere nearby, then grabbed my things and headed inside. Angela was sitting on the couch, her eyes puffy and red from crying. Without a word, I went straight to my home office, locked the door behind me, and pulled up the recordings of her conversation with Benjamin. Listening to her unravel in panic as she tried to explain things was both vindicating and sickening. I forwarded the file to Patricia, then called her. "Elton?" she answered, her voice sharp and businesslike. "I just got your email. I'm finalizing your documents now. When can they be submitted? If you want, I can arrange for them to be delivered later today," she replied. "I'd appreciate that," I said, my voice cold. "Thank you." I hung up, then went into the kitchen, where Angela was still sitting, avoiding my gaze. I set my briefcase down on the counter and walked over to her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice unyielding. I pulled out the gun I'd kept on the table for the last couple of days, just in case things escalated. She flinched, her eyes flicking to the weapon. "Is that really necessary?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I hope not," I replied coldly. "But if your lover decides to pay a visit, I want to be ready." "My lover?" she stammered, looking genuinely shocked. "Don't play dumb, Angela," I said, my patience wearing thin. "I'm not in the mood for games." I pointed to the seat across from me, and she slowly sat down, trembling. "Later today, someone's coming by with papers for you," I said, my voice firm. Her face drained of color. "Papers? You mean divorce?" "That's right," I replied, my tone hard as stone. "I know everything about Benjamin, his son, and the others you were with. I canceled your credit card," I told her flatly, sliding an envelope across the table toward Angela. "And here's a cashier's check for your share of the remaining balance." Angela's face crumpled as she looked down at the check. "But I wasn't finished. There's also a restraining order requiring you to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace." Tears began to spill down her cheeks. "So you're kicking me out?" she asked, her voice breaking, barely above a whisper. I nodded, my gaze never leaving hers. "Yes, you'll have time to pack up your things before the papers are served." Angela's wide eyes stared at me in disbelief. "You've become so cold, so heartless." "I learned from the best," I replied, my voice steely, unfeeling. "But I have one question. What happened to you? How did you go from a loving wife to this?" She couldn't look me in the eye. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. "It happened on that camping trip," she murmured. "You were on the lake and I was resting in the tent. Benjamin walked by and saw me undressed. He came in, and, well, it just happened. So just like that," I said, my voice full of contempt. "Some guy walks in and you're ready to throw away everything we had?" Her lips trembled as she nodded. "How many times did it happen during that trip?" I demanded. "Twice," she admitted quietly. "Once when you were skiing, and again when he sent me back to the office." I shook my head, pointing at the photos I'd laid on the table. "I noticed none of these men used protection. You weren't concerned about getting pregnant or catching something." "I'm on the pill," she muttered, her face flushed. "Doesn't make it foolproof," I replied, the anger seething in my chest. "Did you ever think about the risks? Or were you just that reckless?" "God, no," she whispered, her face burying in her hands as she cried. "You know," I said, my voice colder than ever, "over the years, I had opportunities to stray, women more attractive than you. But I never took them because I thought I had a loyal, faithful wife. Now I realize I was living in a fantasy." I stood up and pointed to the pile of bags she had gathered by the door. "Go pack. Anything you leave behind will be burned or donated." Her eyes filled with more tears. "Can't we try counseling? Please? I'll change. I promise." I stared at her, feeling nothing but a strange numbness. "Settle in," I said. "I will never forgive you for this, Angela. Not after everything you've done. Now pack your things. Whatever you leave behind will be gone by tomorrow." Her shoulders shook as she packed one bag after another, glancing at me one last time. "Can you at least help me carry these to the car?" she asked, her voice desperate. "No," I replied coldly. "It's your trash. You take it. And remember, if you leave anything, even that wedding dress, it'll be gone by tomorrow." "My wedding dress," she gasped. My parents spent thousands on that. Then you'd better take it, I said, turning away, my back to her as she carried bag after bag to her car. 2 hours later, she came back inside, exhausted. I can't fit anything else in the car. Can I come back for the rest? She asked, her voice quiet and broken. No, I replied firmly. You can arrange for someone else to get it. But you're not coming near this house. I paused, my eyes hardening. There's a restraining order against you. She gave me a weary, tearful look. What will I tell my parents? Try the truth for a change, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. Tell them you cheated on me with my boss and several others. Angela's eyes widened with fear. If I tell them that, they'll disown me. Not my problem, I replied coldly. But if you try to paint me as the villain, well, you know they'll find out the whole story. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I looked at Angela. That's for you. She opened the door and found a sheriff's deputy standing there, looking professional but impassive. Are you Angela Roger? He asked. She nodded, and he handed her an envelope. You've been served, he said, his tone matter of fact. You're required to vacate the premises immediately. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she signed the papers, then looked back at me. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yeah, I replied, my voice distant. Me too. Goodbye, Angela. With that, she left without another word, escorted by the deputy. The next few days were a blur. I didn't hear from Angela again, but Benjamin called twice, leaving threatening messages. Elton, he barked in one voicemail. I know you're there. Drop this lawsuit or I swear I'll make you pay. I saved the voicemail and immediately sent it to Patricia, who contacted the sheriff's department. I wasn't about to let Benjamin make good on his threats. Then Angela's parents, Todd and Freya, called, asking if they could come pick up her things. I agreed, but made it clear they needed to make sure she stayed away. When they arrived, Freya looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She just made a mistake, she said, voice pleading. Surely you can forgive her. What did she tell you? I asked, crossing my arms. She said she had a fight with your boss, Freya replied, clearly confused. I took out the envelope of photos and DVDs, spreading them out on the table before them. Their faces went pale as they saw the images. I'm sorry she didn't tell you the truth, I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. It was much worse than she made it seem. Elton, Freya whispered, horrified. I had no idea. Todd's face turned red with rage. I'm going to have a word with our daughter, he said, his voice tight with fury. He finished loading the last of Angela's things into their car. I'm sorry, he added before pulling me into a brief hug. They both left shortly after, the weight of the situation hanging heavily in the air. Later that evening, there was another knock on my door. I checked the peephole and saw Benjamin, his son Matt, and 2 of my former colleagues standing there. I moved quickly to my office, grabbed my gun, and dialed 911. Keeping the weapon hidden behind my back, I barely managed to open the door before they stormed in, with Benjamin leading the charge. I'm going to teach you a lesson, you piece of shit, he snarled, stepping forward menacingly. I pulled out my pistol and aimed it directly at him. The sight of the barrel froze him and his buddies in their tracks. You really want to test me? I asked, my voice steady. Just so you know, I've already called emergency services. The cops are on their way. If you're still here when they show up, you'll all be arrested for violating the restraining order. Benjamin's face paled as one of his friends muttered, I think he's serious. Yeah, I confirmed, my finger resting on the trigger. I'm serious. Just then, the sound of sirens blared outside. I could see the red and blue lights flashing through the windows. The men started to turn to leave, but it was too late. Uniformed officers were already standing in the doorway. One of the officers stepped forward. Put the weapon down, sir, he said firmly. I complied, placing the gun on the kitchen table and raising my hands in surrender. Officer, I said, nodding toward Benjamin and his group. These men violated the restraining order, broke into my home, and threatened me. I'd like them arrested. The officer asked for a copy of the order, which I handed over. He reviewed it briefly before turning to the four men. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, he ordered. The officers cuffed them, reading them their rights as Benjamin shot me a final glare. I just stood back, watching them being led away. Do you have a license for this firearm? One of the officers asked, eyeing the weapon. Yes, officer, I do, I replied, showing him my driver's license and firearm certification. He nodded, giving me a word of caution. Be careful with that, he said. Understood. Thank you, officer, I replied, feeling a strange sense of relief as the police left with the four men. Rose's weekly counseling sessions helped me work through the lingering anger and trust issues I had. Through her guidance, I even picked up a few new habits. I started hitting the gym 3 times a week, joined a martial arts class for mental discipline, and followed a diet and fitness program she recommended. The divorce itself was straightforward. Angela didn't contest it, but the alienation of affection lawsuits were another story. Patricia warned me these cases were tough, but remarkably, 2 of the defendants were eventually fired due to the publicity. The case against Benjamin, however, was the one that shocked us all. After hearing testimony and reviewing Patricia's evidence, including Benjamin's financials, the judge ruled in my favor, awarding a judgment of $1 million. As the trial came to a close, the judge had some harsh words for Benjamin. Mr. Ayrton, the judge began, looking down at him with clear disapproval. Your conduct in this case is appalling. Not only did you betray a man who considered you a friend, but you also used your position to destroy his marriage and personal life. And I see here that you violated a restraining order multiple times. The judge paused for a moment before continuing. I find in favor of the plaintiff, and I order $1 million in damages. Benjamin's lawyer stood up, protesting. Your Honor, this ruling is highly unusual. The judge shot him a cold look. Not as unusual as your client's behavior, he replied. If restitution isn't paid immediately, he will serve time in jail for contempt. He banged his gavel, signaling the end of the case. Benjamin, clearly defeated, handed his lawyer a check. The check was passed to Patricia, who forwarded it to me. To my surprise, the check cleared without issue, allowing me to pay Patricia her share. As news of the lawsuit spread, several of Benjamin's clients reached out to me, unwilling to continue doing business with someone so willing to destroy another man's life. With business drying up, it seemed Benjamin was on the path to bankruptcy. Throughout all of this, I kept my distance from dating. A few women at the company showed interest, but I was still technically married until the divorce was finalized, and I wanted to do things the right way. When the paperwork was finally settled, I celebrated quietly with a few close friends from work. A couple of months later, Angela's mother, Freya, called me out of the blue. Elton, it's Freya. Do you have a moment? Her voice trembled on the other end of the line. Of course, Freya, I said, wondering what this was about. It's Angela, she said, her voice shaking. She's HIV positive. She just got her test results. I felt a wave of coldness wash over me. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my tone flat. But honestly, I'm not surprised. We're officially divorced now, so there's nothing I can do. I understand, she replied softly. But I was hoping you might consider speaking to her. She's not handling this well. I sighed, unsure if it would help, but finally agreed. All right, Freya. I'll come by for a few minutes. When I arrived at their house, I was shocked by how much Angela had changed. She looked thin and frail, hardly recognizable from the vibrant woman I once knew. She tried to approach me, but I held up my hand, keeping a cautious distance. She sat on the sofa, motioning for me to join her. You look good, Elton, she said weakly, offering a sad smile. Better than I remember. How have you been? I'm doing okay, I said, keeping my tone neutral. New job, new friends, new outlook. How are you holding up? Not well, she admitted, barely able to meet my gaze. You know I'm HIV positive now. Your mom told me, I said, my voice soft but matter of fact. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you know when it happened? She asked, her voice cracking. I think it happened during one of those days with Benjamin, she confessed. I was with men, and none of them used protection. I nodded, letting her words sink in. Does Benjamin know? Not yet, she whispered, her face pale. But I'll have to tell him soon. I shook my head, unable to fathom the mess she had entangled herself in. Well, I'm sure you won't take it well, I said, knowing Benjamin's temper. No, probably not, she agreed. She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. Elton, I just want to say I'm sorry. I realize now how many lives I ruined. I had the best husband anyone could ask for, and I threw it all away. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to, but I don't want to leave this world without knowing if you can forgive me. For the first time, I felt she truly understood the weight of her actions. I could see how deeply she regretted it, and in that moment, I remembered Rose's advice about forgiveness. Holding on to anger would only hold me back. All right, Angela, I said, nodding slowly. I forgive you. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, Thank you. That means more to me than you'll ever know. She composed herself before adding, You deserve to be happy, Elton. Find someone to love and trust. Have a family and move on. I will, I replied quietly. I appreciate the sentiment. And if you ever need someone to talk to, let me know, she said, wiping her eyes. I will, I replied. Thank you for calling me, Angela. She nodded, looking up at me with a soft expression. I've missed you. I miss the woman I married, I said gently, the words heavy in my chest. By the way, how are things with Benjamin and Matt? I asked. She shook her head. It's not good. Benjamin's become even more abusive since the lawsuit, and his business is falling apart. He's been very harsh with me lately. Do you want me to be there when you tell him about your diagnosis? I asked. No, but thank you, she said quietly. I need to do this alone. We said our goodbyes, and as I left, Freya hugged me tightly. Thank you, Elton. It meant the world to her. A couple of weeks later, as I was eating dinner, a news report caught my attention. Local businessman and 2 others found dead in suspected murder-suicide, the anchor announced. Benjamin Ayrton, his son, and an unidentified woman were found with fatal gunshot wounds. Authorities are investigating and will release more details soon. I froze, my heart sinking. I grabbed my phone and dialed Freya. She answered, sobbing. Freya, I just saw the news. Was it? It was her, Freya choked out. Elton, Benjamin shot her and his son and finally himself. Oh my God, I whispered, feeling a wave of sadness, confusion, and disbelief wash over me. I know, Elton, Freya said, her voice breaking. I think she told him about her diagnosis, and he snapped. They're doing an autopsy now, she continued. I never wanted any of this, Elton. I hope you know that. I do, I said quietly. Thank you for making peace with her. I like to think she's at peace now. I hope so, Freya whispered. Thank you for coming to see her. Let me know if there's anything I can do at Angela's memorial, I said softly. I attended the memorial with her parents. It was a somber event, and the autopsy revealed that both Benjamin and Matt had been HIV positive as well. Apparently, when they learned the news, everything spiraled out of control. Angela had tried to suggest they all get tested, but upon hearing the diagnosis, Benjamin had snapped. He took her life, his son's, and finally his own. It was tragic and senseless. The next few days were spent reflecting on everything, mourning not only the loss of the woman I once loved, but the life I thought we'd share. The memories of our good years lingered, bittersweet reminders of what once was. One day, as I was getting ready to leave the office, Tracy, one of my coworkers, stopped by. Hey, Elton, she said with a warm smile. Would you like to join us for happy hour tonight? I figured you might need a little company for a change. I almost turned her down. The idea of putting myself out there again felt foreign, even daunting. But then a thought crossed my mind. Life was moving forward. Maybe I should, too. What the hell? I said, smiling back at her. I could use some good company. Well then, she replied, her smile widening. We'll see you at Hitchhikers after work. As she left, I leaned back in my chair, a strange but welcome sense of peace settling over me. The cycle of life continued, and for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to see where it might take me next.